When my father died, his will named me the heir to a multi-million-dollar empire, but no one in the room expected it. Especially not my stepmother, who had spent years erasing me from his life. She thought she had one. What she didn't know was that my father and I had planned for this moment all along. Rain fell in gentle sheets outside the glass walls of the Singapore high-rise, muting the city's vibrant rhythm. Maxwell Harrison sat at a polished marble conference table. A model of the Marina Heights redevelopment sprawled before him. The deal he was about to close would redefine the city's skyline and solidify his place in global real estate. Yet, his hand hovered over the phone, eyes locked on the name glowing on the screen. Grace Anderson. He hadn't heard from her in 5 years. Maxwell, her voice cracked. Your father passed away last night. The words knocked the breath from his lungs. It didn't seem possible, not because he hadn't considered the idea, but because he'd imagined having more time. Time to mend what had been broken. Time to say what needed to be said. Instead, time had run out. That night, Maxwell boarded the first flight to Maplewood. The town was just as he remembered, quaint, sleepy, suffocating. Maplewood hadn't changed, but he had. The sprawling Victorian home, once a symbol of his father's warmth and strength, now loomed like a relic of betrayal. He stepped out of the cab, suitcase in hand, and hesitated at the foot of the stone steps. The door swung open. Maxwell Brittany greeted him. Her voice was flat, her posture rigid. We weren't sure you'd come. He offered a curt nod. He was my father. Inside, the air was heavy with artificial perfume, and colder than memory. Diana's ultramodern decor had scrubbed the house of its soul. His father's presence lingered only in fragments, the scent of cedar in the floorboards. The creak of the stairwell. Diana rose from a white leather couch with rehearsed grief etched across her face. Maxwell, what a surprise. We tried to reach you. He said nothing. The funeral's tomorrow at 2, Tyler chimed in, sprawled on a sleek armchair. Your room's being used for storage, Diana added. We can prepare the guest room. He clenched his jaw. The message was clear, you don't belong here. That night, Grace found him on the porch. Her presence was a balm. They've been awful, she said. Since he got sick, they've acted like they own everything. But your father, he asked about you. A lot. He kept articles about your work. Maxwell looked away, blinking against the lump in his throat. His office. Diana boxed everything up. Changed the locks. A fury rooted in sorrow surged through him. Later, in the dim hallway, he found the loose floorboard where his father used to hide spare keys. Some things hadn't changed. Inside the stripped office, only one thing remained, the painting of Monte Cristo. Behind it, taped to the canvas, was a key. The next morning, he visited First National Bank. Box number 247 contained everything his father had promised: deeds, legal documents, and a USB drive. In a quiet corner of a cafe, Maxwell watched the video. His father, pale but composed, spoke directly to the camera. Maxwell, if you're watching this, I'm gone. I'm sorry. I let Diana come between us, but I never stopped planning for your future. The video detailed how Harrison Properties' most valuable assets had been secretly transferred to Maxwell trusts, gifts, and quiet sales. Diana knew nothing. I couldn't let her destroy what we built, his father said. Tears streamed down Maxwell's face. His father hadn't abandoned him. He'd protected him. Franklin Ross, his father's business partner, confirmed it all. Your father was always 3 steps ahead. Diana thinks she's inheriting an empire, but you own the crown jewels. She also planned to sell the Riverside project, his and his father's shared dream, to Lawrence Blackwood, a man who built soulless towers for profit. That can't happen, Maxwell said. Franklin's smile was grim. Then you'd better show up to the will reading. That afternoon, the family gathered for the will. Diana, draped in designer mourning black, acted the grieving widow. Harold Stevenson, the attorney she'd manipulated for years, began reading the document. When Maxwell entered, Diana's face froze. This meeting is for heirs only, Harold said. Maxwell placed the property deeds on the table. You mean these? Shock rippled through the room. Diana sputtered. Tyler rose to object. The assets were legally transferred, Maxwell said. 3 years ago. Dad made sure of it. He turned to Harold. You can continue. Later that day, Margaret Wilson, his father's longtime assistant, greeted him with tears. He believed in you, Maxwell. He never gave up. She handed him another USB drive. He wanted you to have this. Privately. The videos were like time capsules, his father walking properties, explaining their value, their purpose, their potential. "You were right, son," he said in one recording. "About everything. I let the wrong people steer me off course, but I've made it right. Now it's your turn." Maxwell spent the day building a legal case, working with James Patterson, the accountant who had helped structure the transfers. Harrison Properties was an empty shell. The real assets belonged to Harrison Legacy Holdings, his company. Diana would inherit the home, some accounts, and income from a few rentals, but the empire she thought was hers had already slipped through her fingers as he walked past the shell of his father's office, now repurposed into a marketing space. Maxwell paused. He remembered the last real conversation he and his father had about community, responsibility, vision. His eyes fell on the spot where the Monte Cristo painting once hung. He whispered, "I'm home, Dad, and I know exactly what to do." And so began the quiet war to reclaim a legacy, the name of the man Diana underestimated. Not yet. Let the battle unfold first. The reading was scheduled for 2 p.m., and I felt both nervous and resolute. Diana and her children had spent years pushing me out of my father's life, thinking they had secured their future by doing so. They had no idea what was coming. I dressed carefully in my best suit, charcoal gray, with a subtle blue tie that had been a gift from my father years ago. In my briefcase, I organized the key documents I might need: property deeds, business registration papers, transfer records, and evidence of my father's true intentions. Before heading to Harold Stevenson's law office, I made one last call to Grace. She had been my closest confidant since my return, and I valued her insight into how to handle the confrontation ahead. "Diana's been telling everyone. You abandoned your father and don't deserve anything," Grace warned me. "She's been playing the devoted wife role to perfection. Be prepared for theatrics." "I'm not looking to humiliate her," I said. "I just want to honor Dad's wishes." Grace's silence spoke volumes. "Okay," I amended. "Maybe I want to humiliate her a little." Grace laughed. "She deserves it. Your dad wasn't happy these last few years, Max. He missed you. Whatever happens today, remember that he wanted you to come home and take your rightful place." With those words bolstering my courage, I headed to Harold Stevenson's office, ready to face the family that had tried to erase me from my father's legacy. Harold Stevenson's law office was perched on the top floor of one of Maplewood's few modest high-rises. The 4-story brick structure stood in stark contrast to the steel and glass monstrosities Diana favored. Ironically, my father had owned the building, and I now did as I entered the lobby. The receptionist blinked in surprise when I gave my name. "Oh, Mr. Harrison, let me just check with Mr. Stevenson." I waited, watching the second hand of the wall clock tick down the final moments of the life Diana thought she controlled. Harold appeared moments later, a slight flush of discomfort on his face. "Maxwell," he said, not offering a handshake. "This is unexpected." I gave him a flat look. "Today's meeting is about my father's will. I intend to be present, of course," but he hesitated, lowering his voice. "Diana was under the impression it would just be immediate family." "I am immediate family." Without waiting for his permission, I walked past him and pushed open the frosted glass doors to the conference room. A hush fell. Diana sat at the head of the table like a reigning queen in mourning, clothed in sleek black, with a string of pearls resting elegantly on her throat. Brittany and Tyler sat on either side of her, dressed to impress. Tyler looked up with a sneer. Brittany, with something like apprehension. "Maxwell," Diana said, her voice sharp with false surprise. "What a surprise. I came to hear my father's will," I said, pulling out a chair across from her. Harold followed me inside, wringing his hands. "I suppose we can begin." The formalities dragged. Legal jargon flowed like molasses, but I waited, watched. Diana dabbed at her dry eyes. Tyler checked his watch. Brittany bit her lip. "To my wife Diana," Harold read at last. "I leave our family home at 247 Maple Avenue, its contents, and the sum of $2 million. Diana gave a queenly nod. "To my stepdaughter, Brittany, I leave the sum of $1 million, and my collection of first edition books." Her eyes widened. I caught a flicker of real emotion. "To my stepson, Tyler, I leave the sum of $1 million and my vintage car collection." Tyler grinned. Harold paused. "As to my business interests," he read slowly, "Harrison Properties and all associated assets I leave to my son, Maxwell Harrison. Double quotes. Silence. Diana choked. That's impossible. Harold cleared his throat. A codicil was filed 6 months ago. It reversed previous arrangements. You never told me. She spat. I wasn't aware myself until yesterday. It was filed with the county clerk directly by Richard. She turned red, then white. You're lying. Harrison Properties is mine. I've been running it. Then you'll know these, I said, placing the folder of deeds on the table. Riverside Development. Maple Street Apartments. The downtown block legally transferred to me by Richard over the last 3 years. Diana snatched the documents. Her hands trembled. These are forgeries. They're not. They're public record. You can't do this. Tyler shouted. You left. I didn't leave. I was pushed. And now I'm back to finish what Dad and I started. Harold scanned the documents. These transfers are valid. If they were completed while Richard was alive, they fall outside the estate. Then what's left? Diana whispered. A company without its assets. I answered. But Richard also formed Harrison Legacy Holdings, a new entity. He transferred operational control there. I own it. Pandemonium erupted. Tyler stood, fists clenched. Brittany whispered something to herself. Diana looked ready to faint. I waited. When it quieted, I added, Richard left you security. Diana. He wasn't cruel, but he made sure you couldn't destroy what he built. Diana's eyes narrowed. He was confused. Sick. I'll contest everything. I shrugged. Feel free. But he recorded everything. His plans, his health, his reasons. It's all documented. You mean videos? She asked, voice rising. Yes. I patted my briefcase. Hours of them. Brittany finally spoke. Is it true? Did Mom keep you from talking to Dad? Nodded. Yes, he tried. I have the proof. Diana rose. This isn't over. No, I said. It's just beginning. That evening, I returned to the house, Diana's house now. The tension was suffocating. Tyler sulked like a child. Diana barely looked at me, but it was Brittany who knocked on my door. Can we talk? She asked. I nodded. She sat nervous. I found this. She handed me a notebook, Dad's handwriting. His journal, his thoughts, his regrets. He missed you, Brittany said quietly. And he was afraid of what Mom would do to his legacy. Why? Show me this, I asked. Because I love Maplewood, she said. And because it's the right thing. A sudden shout from downstairs interrupted us. You don't belong here. Diana screeched. I rushed down. A woman stood in the foyer. Dark-haired, confident, familiar somehow. I'm Alice Thornton, she said, looking at me. Richard was my father, too. A long silence. Diana looked murderous. She's lying. Diana hissed. Alice turned to me. He kept me a secret at my request. I just came to meet my brother. I stepped forward and shook her hand. Then we have a lot to talk about. That night, alone in the guest room, a message buzzed on my phone. Lawrence Blackwood. We need to talk. This isn't over. Outside, Maplewood streets were quiet. But the war for its future was only just beginning. The development project. I nearly laughed out loud. The most valuable property in the portfolio. That's not a settlement, that's a heist. It was my idea, Diana insisted. I worked with Richard on the plans for years. That project is my vision. It was Dad's vision long before you came into the picture. I corrected her. And it wasn't luxury condos and boutiques. It was affordable housing, community spaces, and local businesses. Diana's facade cracked slightly. Maplewood needs to evolve. Maxwell. The old way of doing things is dying. Richard understood that toward the end. Did he? I asked, pulling out my phone and playing one of Dad's videos, the one where he explicitly stated that Diana didn't understand his true vision for the Riverside property. Diana's face flushed with anger. He was sick. Confused. He was clear-minded enough to legally transfer his most important assets to me, I pointed out, and to document why he was doing it. The meeting ended at an impasse, with Diana storming out and her attorney promising further legal action. But as the weeks passed, no lawsuit materialized. According to Franklin's sources, Diana's attorneys had advised her that her position was legally untenable. Meanwhile, I had been getting to know my half-sister, Alice. Unlike Diana's children, Alice had no interest in the family business. She was a professor of environmental science at a university in Colorado, passionate about conservation and sustainability. Our conversations gave me ideas for incorporating green spaces and sustainable design into the Riverside development. Dad would have loved that, Alice said when I shared my updated vision for the project. He was always interested in environmental initiatives, but Diana discouraged them as too costly. Brittany had become an unexpected ally in navigating the transition. She had distanced herself from Diana's machinations, moving into an apartment downtown and offering insights into her mother's business dealings that proved invaluable. Mom's been liquidating her assets, she informed me during one of our regular coffee meetings. Selling jewelry, art, even some of her designer furniture. I think she's planning to leave Maplewood. Tyler remained hostile, but increasingly isolated. His friends in town had begun to distance themselves as rumors of his involvement in some of Diana's more questionable business decisions circulated. The real breakthrough came during a town council meeting where I presented my revised plans for the Riverside development. Gone were Diana's luxury condos and exclusive shops, replaced with a mixed-use development that included affordable housing, spaces for local businesses, a community center, and extensive public access to the waterfront. This is the development my father originally envisioned, I explained to the packed meeting room. A project that would benefit all of Maplewood, not just the wealthy few. Lawrence Blackwood was there, of course, armed with his glossy presentation and promises of tax revenue from his high-end development. But when residents began asking questions about housing affordability and public access, his proposal quickly lost support. The Harrison plan preserves Maplewood's character while allowing for growth, Grace argued from the audience. The Blackwood plan turns us into just another playground for the rich. The council voted unanimously to support my proposal, dealing a decisive blow to both Lawrence and Diana's vision for Maplewood's future. As I left the meeting, Lawrence approached me, his expression grim but resigned. "You win this round, Harrison," he said, "but I've been in this business a lot longer than you. I can wait, or you could adapt," I suggested. "There's room for your company in my development plan if you're willing to work within the community-focused framework." Lawrence seemed startled by the offer. "Why would you suggest that?" "Because despite everything, you're good at what you do," I acknowledged. "And Dad always said that a smart businessman can find a way to do well by doing good." We didn't reach an agreement that night, but the door had been opened. Sometimes reconciliation comes from unexpected directions. The final confrontation with Diana came not in a courtroom, but in the garden of what had once been our family home. I found her there one evening when I came to collect the last of my belongings before moving into my place. She was sitting on the stone bench near my mother's rose bushes, looking smaller and older than I remembered. When she saw me, she didn't lash out as I expected. "I'm leaving Maplewood," she said simply. "There's nothing for me here anymore." I sat beside her, maintaining a careful distance. "Where will you go?" "Back to Connecticut. My sister is there." She glanced at me sideways. "You've won, Maxwell, the company, the town, and even my daughter's loyalty. Are you satisfied?" The question wasn't entirely bitter. There was genuine curiosity in it. "It was never about winning," I said after a moment. "It was about honoring Dad's legacy, about doing right by Maplewood." Diana was quiet for a long moment. "He changed after he left," she finally said. "Became more distant, more focused on his projects. I thought if I took an interest in the business, it would bring us closer. And then you got a taste for it," I suggested. She didn't deny it. "I'm not apologizing for wanting security, Maxwell. When you've been left with nothing once in your life, you do whatever it takes to make sure it never happens again." I thought about the complex woman beside me. Manipulative and materialistic, yes, but also shaped by her fears and experiences. "Dad left you financially secure. The house, the investments. You didn't need to try to take everything. Need has little to do with it," she replied with unexpected frankness. "But it's done now." She stood, straightening her shoulders. "I've instructed my attorney to withdraw all objections to the will and property transfers. In return, I expect you to honor the provisions Dad made for me and my children." "I never planned to contest those," I assured her. She nodded once, a business-like conclusion to our relationship. "Goodbye, Maxwell. I doubt we'll see each other again." As Diana walked away, I felt not triumph, but a strange mix of relief and sadness. The family I had once hoped for when Dad remarried had never materialized, but in its place, new connections had formed with Alice, with Brittany, with the community of Maplewood that had welcomed me home. The next morning, I met with the Harrison Properties team to officially launch the Riverside Development Project. As I looked around the conference room at the eager faces, including Brittany, who had recently joined the marketing department, I felt my father's presence strongly. My father used to say that property is permanence, I told the team. What we build here will outlast all of us. So let's make sure it's something Maplewood can be proud of for generations to come. As the meeting broke up, Grace approached me with a smile. Your dad would be proud, Max. I nodded, feeling at peace for the first time since returning to Maplewood. I think he would. And I think this is just the beginning. 1 year after my return to Maplewood, I stood on the newly constructed observation deck overlooking the riverside development. What had once been vacant land was now a bustling construction site with the first phase of buildings already taking shape. Mixed-income housing units flanked a central green space, while the foundations for the community center and local business incubator were being laid closer to the water. Quite a view, said Franklin, joining me at the railing. Richard would have loved this. I nodded, thinking of my father's vision for this property and how close it had come to becoming something entirely different. I wish he could see it. He can, Franklin said simply, pointing to a bronze plaque we had installed. At the entrance to the development, Richard Harrison Memorial Park would be the centerpiece of the project, ensuring that my father's contribution to Maplewood would be remembered. The past year has been transformative both for Harrison Properties and for me. Taking control of my father's company had forced me to put down roots in a way I'd avoided for years, to engage with the community not just as a developer but as a citizen with a stake in its future. The scholarship committee approved all 15 applications, Alice informed me, consulting her tablet as she approached. My half-sister had moved to Maplewood 6 months ago to help establish the Richard Harrison Foundation, which provided educational opportunities for local students interested in sustainable development and community planning. Perfect, I replied, and the internship program launches next month. We've got partnerships with 3 colleges already. Alice had become an integral part of my life, bridging the gap between my past and present. Through her, I learned stories about our father. I'd never known his quiet environmental activism, his anonymous support for students who couldn't afford college, his mentorship of young entrepreneurs. He never wanted recognition, Alice explained once. He just wanted to make things better. In that spirit, I had redirected Harrison Properties toward development that balanced profit with community benefit. It wasn't always easy. Lawrence Blackwood and his allies on the Business Council frequently opposed our more progressive initiatives. But we were making progress. Surprisingly, it was Brittany who often helped navigate these political waters. Having grown up watching Diana charm and manipulate her way through Maplewood society, Brittany had developed a keen understanding of the town's social dynamics. Lawrence is planning to speak against the affordable housing expansion at next week's council meeting. She warned me as we walked back to the office. He's been lobbying council members behind the scenes. Any suggestions? I asked, having learned to value her strategic thinking. Brittany smiled. I've already arranged for residents from the first phase to attend and share their stories. Lawrence can argue with us, but he can't argue with families who now have stable housing because of the development. Back at Harrison Properties headquarters, I found Margaret waiting with a stack of documents requiring my signature. Among them was the final paperwork severing Diana's remaining connections to the company. She had agreed to sell her minority shares in exchange for a lump sum payment. Have you heard from her? Margaret asked as I signed the forms. Not directly, I admitted. Brittany says she's remarried and living in Greenwich. She's joined the board of an art museum and is busy reinventing herself as a philanthropist. I harbored no ill will toward Diana anymore. She had acted according to her nature, just as my father had ultimately acted according to his by ensuring his legacy would be protected. The Richard Harrison I had come to know through his videos, journals, and the stories others shared was more complex than the father I thought I knew, more strategic, more farsighted, more forgiving of human weakness. You've got dinner with Grace at 7, Margaret reminded me as I handed back the signed documents. And don't forget, the Historical Society wants an answer about the old mill property by tomorrow. I thanked her and headed to my office, my father's old office, which I'd restored to something resembling its former state. With the addition of my touches, the Monte Cristo painting hung in its original place, though the hidden key was long gone. Photographs lined the shelves, not just of me and Dad, but now including Alice, Brittany, Grace, and other important people in my life. The most meaningful addition was a simple framed note that had been among my father's personal effects. Property is permanent, but legacy is in people. RHID made peace with Tyler as well. After several months of hostility, he had finally approached me with a business proposition. He wanted to open a high-end restaurant in one of the Harrison Properties buildings downtown. Against Margaret's advice, I had agreed, offering favorable lease terms. "He'll mess it up," Margaret predicted darkly. "He has no work ethic." But surprisingly, Tyler's restaurant had become a success. He had found his passion in the culinary world, something Diana had always discouraged as beneath their social status. While we would never be close, we had reached a civil understanding. As the sun began to set over the river, I made a final call to check on the status of the memorial scholarship named for my mother. This had been one of my first initiatives upon taking control of the company, creating a fund for young women pursuing careers in architecture. My mother's unfulfilled dream. The first recipients graduate next spring, the program administrator informed me. They're already asking about internship opportunities with Harrison Properties. After hanging up, I took a moment to reflect on how far I'd come since that rainy day in Singapore when I'd received the news of my father's death. I had returned to Maplewood, angry and hurt, focused on claiming what was rightfully mine. Somewhere along the way, that mission had transformed into something larger, honoring not just my inheritance, but the responsibility that came with it. The confrontation at the will reading, my dramatic moment of placing the property deeds on the table, now seemed like a lifetime ago. It had been satisfying, yes, but the real satisfaction came from what followed. The relationships rebuilt, the community strengthened, the legacy secured. Grace was waiting for me at our favorite restaurant, her smile warming as I approached. Our friendship had deepened over the past year, gradually evolving into something more. She had been my anchor through the tumultuous transition, my guide to the Maplewood that had evolved during my absence, and eventually, my partner in both business and life. "The Riverside lookout is spectacular," I told her as we settled at our table. "You should see the sunset from up there." "Show me after dinner," she suggested. I nodded, already planning to bring champagne. The ring I'd purchased last week was burning a hole in my pocket, waiting for the perfect moment. As we enjoyed our meal, I found myself thinking about the journey that had brought me here. The inheritance I had fought for had turned out to be so much more than property deeds and business assets. It was a chance to reconcile with my past, to forge new connections, to build something meaningful on the foundation my father had created. The real estate deeds I had dramatically presented at the will reading had been important. Yes, they had given me legal control of my father's legacy, but the true inheritance was the vision and values he had instilled in me. The lessons about community and responsibility that had shaped my approach to development. Even during our years apart, Diana had never understood that. She had seen the properties as assets to be leveraged, the business as a source of wealth and status. She had missed the deeper purpose that had driven my father throughout his life. As Grace and I walked along the riverfront after dinner, hand in hand in the gathering twilight, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. For my father's foresight, for the second chance at belonging in Maplewood, for the opportunity to build something that would outlast me. "What are you thinking about?" Grace asked, noticing my contemplative mood. "Legacy," I replied. "What we leave behind. How we're remembered." She squeezed my hand. "Your dad would be proud of what you've done here, what you're still doing." Nodded, thinking of the complex, imperfect, ultimately loving father I had come to know better in death than I sometimes had in life. He had made mistakes. We all did, but in the end, he had done his best to protect what mattered most. As we reached the observation deck overlooking the project that would define Maplewood's future, I knew it was time. The ring box felt heavy in my pocket, but my heart was light. Whatever came next, I was exactly where I was meant to be, building on my father's legacy while creating my own. Have you ever had to stand up for what was rightfully yours against people who tried to take advantage? Or have you experienced a moment where you had to choose between justice and reconciliation? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed this story of inheritance, drama, and family redemption, and subscribe for more true stories that make you think about legacy, family, and what truly matters in life. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the most valuable inheritance isn't property or money, but the values and vision passed down through generations. 2 years after the groundbreaking ceremony for the Riverside development, the transformation of Maplewood was nearly complete. The once abandoned riverfront now buzzed with life, children laughing in the park, families dining at local eateries, small businesses thriving in the newly built retail spaces. The vision that had once only existed in my father's journals and late-night conversations had come alive. A large mural now adorned the exterior wall of the community center. Painted by local artists and students, it depicted the evolution of Maplewood, its industrial past, its decline, and now, its rebirth. At the center of it all was a smiling portrait of my father, paintstrokes capturing his hopeful gaze. The mural had become a symbol of what the town could achieve when its people worked together. Inside the community center, I met with the advisory board of the Richard Harrison Foundation. Alice chaired the meeting, her presence as steady and passionate as ever. We reviewed new applications, internship progress, and upcoming workshops on environmental responsibility in urban development. Our programs had now reached regional attention, with neighboring towns looking to adopt similar initiatives. Brittany arrived late, fresh from coordinating a charity event. Her transformation over the past 2 years had been remarkable. No longer just Diana's daughter, she had become an advocate for youth mentorship and entrepreneurship. Her latest initiative, a startup incubator for young business owners, had already helped launch 6 new ventures in Maplewood. Thought I'd be giving business advice, she joked as she joined us. Dad would've, I said with a smile. He saw something in you even if he didn't always say it. Later that week, I received an invitation to a real estate conference in Boston. They wanted me to speak about ethical development and sustainable urban renewal. At first, I hesitated. The spotlight had never been my goal. But after speaking with Grace, I agreed. You've built something worth sharing, she encouraged me. Let others learn from it. At the conference, I stood before an audience of developers, city planners, and students. I told them about Maplewood, about my father's legacy, and about the difficult choices I'd had to make, not for profit, but for people. I spoke of Diana, not as a villain, but as someone whose fear of loss had shaped her decisions. I spoke of reconciliation, of inclusion, and of the power of investing in a community. The response was overwhelming. Several attendees approached me after the speech, eager to learn more, to implement similar values in their projects. It felt like validation, not just for me, but for everyone who had believed in the Riverside vision. Back in Maplewood, progress continued. Tyler had expanded his restaurant into a full hospitality group, training at-risk youth in culinary arts and hospitality management. We even collaborated on a community kitchen initiative, providing meals to those in need. Against all odds, Tyler had become one of the most impactful figures in town. As winter approached, we planned a ceremony for the final phase of the development. The community center would host a dedication night for the Richard and Evelyn Harrison Scholarship Hall. It was more than just a building. It was a promise to future generations. That evening, standing beneath the soft glow of lanterns and fairy lights, I looked at the crowd gathered in the courtyard. Alice, Grace, Brittany, even Lawrence Blackwood, now an uneasy ally, having recently signed a partnership agreement that would bring his design expertise into future eco-conscious projects. When it came time to speak, I paused, letting the silence stretch. My father used to say property is permanence, I began. But I've come to believe that permanence means nothing without purpose. We inherit more than land or wealth, we inherit values, responsibilities, and the potential to shape a better world. Applause filled the night air, echoing off the buildings we had raised together. And somewhere in that applause, I felt him not just remembered, but present. Richard Harrison, the man who had built more than just a company. He had built a path. After the ceremony, I finally asked Grace the question I'd been waiting to ask since the night on the observation deck. I built all of this, I said, but none of it means anything without someone to share it with. I knelt, presenting the ring I had carried for over a year. She laughed through tears. It took you long enough. She said yes. A few months later, on a crisp spring morning, we were married at the very edge of the river, in the shadow of the Riverside development. Guests included friends, neighbors, colleagues, and people we barely knew but who had become part of our story. Franklin gave the toast. Alice walked me down the aisle, and Brittany stood beside Grace as her maid of honor. I looked out at the community that had once been fractured and divided, now united in purpose. I saw the faces of those we'd helped, and those who had helped us, and I knew this was my true inheritance. Not land, not money, not even the company. It was the people, the stories, the future. Thank you for staying with us through the journey of Legacy Unveiled. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever fought for what's right, found your voice, or built something meaningful against the odds, Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful narratives that celebrate legacy, resilience, and the human spirit. Until next time, keep building what matters.